Hi, I'm Shlomi Ron, the CEO of the Visual Storytelling Institute, and welcome to another episode of the Visual Storytelling Today show. We are actually recording this session from Miami, Florida. It's actually 7 a.m. here, and I'm really excited about the topic of today. Seriously, when you're thinking about what I call the growing communication noise and the need for marketers to break through the clutter, there's definitely a more importance on using visual content, images, videos, and so forth. And what we've started to see is that there's a new age of platforms that really cater to non-designers and people that really need to create compelling visuals quickly. And this is really part of a larger trend that I see, which is all these no-code platforms that really democratizes the ability to create without knowing how to program, or in this case, how to design. So that's really what fascinated me as well. And I think the question on everybody's mind, all right, this is great. You know, you can create visuals easily, but how can you create this perfect visual story that can really inspire people and move them emotionally? So to discuss this, I'm so excited to speak today with Ai Ching Goh. She's the co-founder and CEO of Piktochart. It's a web app offering users without intensive graphic design experience to easily create professional-grade visuals using themed templates. So welcome to the show, Ai Ching.
Thanks for having me, Shlomi.
No, and I should say, I met Ai Ching because she was so kind to invite me to the Business Storytellers Summit that Piktochart hosted just a week ago, I believe. And it was super successful. And I actually watched a couple of her interviews. I really got intrigued to learn more about her background. And maybe we could start with that. Maybe you can share with us your backstory. What was that magic moment that really made you start Piktochart?
Yeah, it's a while back now, but also multiple moments that created or spurred the entire idea. So to go all the way back, I was in my first corporate job, and I was going through a lot of burnout. I was actually hospitalized for surgery that would normally take people about 2 weeks to recover. I was bedridden for 3 months, and then I thought, is this what working life was like? So when I came out of this whole period of soul searching and recovery, I was determined I'm never ever going back to that, really bad burnout episode. And so I was searching for what kind of environment or what kind of mission did I actually want. And what I knew for sure was that I wanted a place that fostered genuine human empathy, where people worked with one another and reviewed each other as, fellow human beings. We're not just workers or cogs in a wheel, basically. And also that has a mission that I can stand behind. So that was those were my requirements. So because we couldn't find anything, we were based in Malaysia. We still are based in Malaysia at that time. And what happened was that we built so my husband and I, we built our web design consultancy firm, and I was looking for clients. Naturally, he's the developer. We have a designer, and I had to study all about inbound marketing and content marketing, how do I attract, more clients. And I came across this whole infographics thing, and I was like, oh, that's pretty effective actually, to try to communicate and get a message across. I was very used to, in my corporate life, to sit through hundreds of slides, and I was like, something that a meaning that could have been so condensed into such a short visual really captivated me, and I was extremely intrigued. So that was how the idea of Piktochart came about. It was born out of necessity. We were trying to find ways in order to generate leads or try to get the message out there, and trying to find the most effective medium of doing so. And it felt like infographics was it.
And was there any kind of a particular infographic that was you can think of was that wow moment that really inspired you? I'm kind of wondering.
No, I don't think so. But I think the movement that inspired me a lot at that time was actually HubSpot. So again, because of corporate environment, all I was taught about in marketing was push, right? Push advertising, push marketing. And I was like, this thing's pull. You don't need to do that much, you just need to figure out really like meaningful, good quality content, and then people, I wouldn't say people naturally be attracted to you, but at least the idea was so novel at that time, and it completely flipped my, my entire like worldview or perspective of marketing itself, and the way information was given out and consumed by brands actually. So yeah, that it wasn't a particular infographic, I would say.
I see. Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting time, and I feel it also in my day-to-day. I'm a great fan of creating infographics that can really distill a simple message visually. I enjoy doing it, so
Yeah.
I totally get it. And one thing, you probably, since you are operating in a very crowded space of other players, I'm sure you also getting this question often about how you differentiate yourself from Canva, which surprisingly actually was started a year after you. You started the Piktochart.
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah, like you said, we get quite a bit. We started out as an infographic tool, so we had a good niche like going on for a while. So Canva didn't come into the market like with a launch at least until I think about like 2014. So like 2 years after us, and Canva tried to cater to a very general and broad, market and audience. So I like to think of them as like they're like a Swiss Army knife. Like any type of like graphic design, you can go to them. Yeah, like you really can go to them. Like they literally allow you to design all kinds of things. But we had a niche from the very beginning, and for us, we actually tried to focus as much as possible on helping people to transfer as much meaning as possible in the lowest amount of time. And since visuals were much easier to consume compared to like text content, we wanted to cater to an audience that really got that and needed that as well. So that would apply to people who had either text or data heavy type of content, translating that into something that was easier to connect with. So our roots have always been in storytelling, and in the months to come, actually, we're building out several like features and product differentiators, even positioning ourselves to ensure that people get it, that we're not just there to help you design something, we'll help you to try to get the message across. Yeah, the story across. Yeah, exactly. But I try to sometimes avoid using the word story too much. But that's the point.
I know that Adobe Spark had some features where they can give you like templates for different part of the story and for different business objectives, and you can just plug and play. So
there's a lot. I mean, like, we saw that in the space. Like previously, everything was all about like design. Design for presentations, design for videos, design for something like website, like you said, no code. And then now you can see the shift. It's moving more and more towards like not just what's beautiful and what's an eye candy, but how do you make the best impact? How do you ensure that people understand? How do you move them to action? And you can see the shift in brands or tools like us, right? Actually making that shift quite a bit now. Yeah.
And do you specialize in specific formats?
Well, because infographics have always been our, like kind of the thing that we started with, that would be currently one of the number one things that we work with. But I would say like presentations are equally, used as much. Sometimes people create much shorter banners, which later on I would also go through a couple of examples that I think really succinctly communicate a message through a visual.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to see a few examples. Before we dive deeper, the question I keep asking all my guests, because as you know, visual storytelling, I started 4 years ago, for example. When I Google visual storytelling, I would get results about graphic design, filmmaking, or photography. It was nothing in the context of marketing. So I'm always curious to ask my guests how they define visual storytelling. So what's your take?
Yeah. I think my short definition, like to make it easy, like to people who are like, oh, that's a jargon or a buzzword, I'll be like, it's just simply the ability of getting a message across through a visual. If I had to expand that a bit more, I may actually say something to do with like condensing meaning in as little time as possible. And here I'd like to share something, just my screen. Hold on. Okay, so here we go. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a company, they're actually a venture capital, like an investor called Loop Ventures, and they do tons and tons of like research into different areas. And one of the things that they talk about is actually the future of human information consumption. I didn't do this research, but it kind of came to the same place that, like what Piktochart like thinks about. So one of the charts here, like they would show that the amount of waking hours or the percentage of waking hours that we spend bombarded with information has come to a point of near saturation. I mean, if you think about it, and it's pretty true, information doesn't just refer to like dashboards, charts, and reports and text. Like while you're, driving to work, you could be listening to, I don't know, Spotify or the radio. That's information consumption. When you're looking at, I don't know, the billboards, again, that's like another form of information consumption. Right. A conversation is an information, it's still an exchange of information. So the idea is that, like, according to their research, like we've hit about, I think 72% of a point. And it's like, it's so crazy that the human mind doesn't stay silent or quiet anymore. So yeah, but anyway, that's one piece of information that I thought was like super interesting. The second one was actually, and this one, I think marketers actually find it intuitive, but we just maybe find it difficult to find statistics that could actually back it up. This is the ratio of information that has been consumed versus the total information that has been created. And it is extremely clear, I think, to everybody that there is way too much information that has been, whether it's in the world of marketing, even more so, because the amount of like blog posts, podcasts, video content, etc. Like there's so much of it that you wouldn't, like the ratio of consumption just isn't meeting it right now. So that's another something that they talk about. And then the shift of the paradigm, I'm going to skip through a lot of this.
By the way, this data is really a global data around the world or a specific region?
Yeah. No, to my understanding, this was conducted by Carrot. So in the US, yeah. So I'm not sure whether it's global, but it's worth checking out. Like as a VC, they're pretty interesting. Like they back all of their theses based on data. So if they don't see an opportunity that's in the future that they don't believe or understand, they basically will not invest in it. Information consumption was one of the areas. So then they talked about, I mean, the article is pretty long, but I'm just going to point us through like this part. Yeah. And this is also where, like, when we came across this, we were like, oh my goodness, this is so similar to what we believe. So like I mentioned earlier, infographics are a way to succinctly communicate something that would have otherwise, taken one more time. But it's also not about trying to condense as much information, because information could be quality, it could be of really poor quality, or like you don't need to know it. Like basically, it's not valuable information. So what they're trying to say is like the most important thing is to try to get as much meaning or valuable information across to a particular audience in the shortest amount of time. So the way, or the person or the tool or the platform, whatever, that has invented it or found a way to that will be kind of riding on a very good wave in the future. So we're not actually in touch with Loop Ventures, but when we came across this, this like whole research that they carried out, like it really resonated a lot with us.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's a great value. Yeah. I mean, I'm always using the example that the problem visual storytelling is trying to solve is the growing communication noise. And when you think about what is communication noise, it's really this conflict between what you just showed earlier, this staggering information overload, that's 72%, and on the flip side, decreasing attention spans. So, yeah. So sorry, that was a really long answer to like how do I think about visual storytelling? But that's precisely what I think. It's how do you get meaningful or good message, good quality or valuable information across to a person in the shortest amount of time using visuals. That's it. In the story part, obviously, it's the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously been running Piktochart for how many years now?
8 years.
8 years. Yeah. Wow. That's a really long time. So first of all, congratulations for making it this far. It's not obvious, these days. And one of the things that I was wondering, since you've been following the industry and seeing, the evolution of your creators, what type of content they've been creating and what seems to be resonating the most, have you figured out, what are the key drivers that make a perfect visual story?
Yeah, we have. So, and I'm not saying we've like totally figured it out. I think we figured out, not just by looking at what our users are creating, but also from learning, from other experts, such as yourself, and like, even with the Business Storyteller Summit, lots of these components kind of came out time and time again. So for me, I focus on three things. Once again, so the first one, and it obviously has to do with, like, you can call it the story, I call it the message. I call it the message because I think that it's very important to have a very compelling and truthful message that we're trying to transmit across to a person. And that message could be, I could use like, perhaps like, in the United States right now, like there's at least 130,000 like cases per day. And that's kind of insane. It's truthful because I got the statistics off the internet, but why is it compelling? How does it move me to act on something? So that's the part that like everybody needs to think about. How do we want to craft that and work out? Like 130,000 may mean very different things to different people. So we kind of need to, either put in a comparison or like to contrast that. So the second one would actually be with structure. In a very short, I think even in a very short and succinct visual, you still would need structure in order to try to figure out how do I best, get that message across to as many people as possible. And the third one would be the delivery. So in a presentation, typically you would be looking at the, tonality, you'll be looking at like gestures, lots of like, visual verbal cues. But in a static design, you're actually looking for design that helps to amplify the message and not distract the message. Because we've been in infographics and we've seen all kinds of like different design trends that have gone over the years, like it's very important to kind of do our very best in order to come up with a design that's like, how do I put it? Like it's clean and it helps to amplify the message as much as possible, instead of being, like on the periphery and like they're beautiful icons and images and things like that. So
I think you mean the third one is really like the brand voice, or what is the visual grammar? What is the style? Is it warm? Is it cold? And that's how basically the static image is actually speaking to you. If you compare it to like a presenter voice that actually presenting, with the static image is really like the tonality, the tone of how the image is projecting emotions.
Yeah, that's right. So like everything goes back to that same, formula that I've mentioned and showed earlier, even from Loop Ventures. Like it's about how do you get as much meaning? So try to remove distraction, how to get that story to be as compelling and positioned as well as possible, and get that across in the shortest amount of time. So it's, the objectives are to do with still thinking about the message, structuring it, and basically coming out with a delivery, or what you call a style, or a brand, like a voice for
And I'm kind of curious, when you think about infographics, as you said, this is your strength. Do you differentiate between infographics that bring to life a concept, an idea without any data, versus those that use some stats in it?
Yeah, I think infographics are like, the most, maybe an oversimplification, you could just think of them as information graphics, right? Like they are graphics that convey a certain amount of information. In the example that I would show later, like one of them clearly demonstrates that. I don't strictly think about them as like data and statistics. I think that's one type, like you have the numerical, more data heavy type of things. But I believe, and from what we have seen, when our users come to create, like not that many of them actually use like charts. Charts is definitely one of our most popular features, but it's not the only one. In fact, a lot of them are trying to find metaphors or analogies, like or a way to succinctly create or communicate something across. So they're looking for visual metaphors, if I could put it that way.
We might also call it like the memes versus the data-driven infographic.
So I do not put or categorize like infographics as well. If you don't have numbers or you don't communicate any form of data, it's not an infographic. I don't think so.
So now that you kind of triggered our interest and curiosity about seeing some examples, maybe you can show us a few that in your opinion really demonstrate the successful visual stories with what you're using on the platform.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So I didn't pick the ones that were created on our platform because a lot of the users that are on Piktochart, they're like the material, a lot of them, oftentimes they're like dashboards for internal usage or presentations for, yeah, and I will not be able to get permission for a lot of them. So yeah, but with that, I still have a couple of examples here. So this is one guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's Jack Butcher. So he does multiple, yeah, I think he has a training platform and like a community that he's building, but he also does this as a side project and it's doing super well. If you look at it, this is like January of 2019 and look at the amount of followers he has right now. It's 100,000 organic followers, you know. He releases one visual per day and look at these visuals. I mean, I'm not going to talk about every single one of them. This, all of it, like look at the delivery or the style, the brand voice, whatever. It's just black and white. He uses one particular font. Some of it doesn't even have text. And if he has a accompanying text, it's usually about one sentence long. He doesn't bother to write, you know, thousands of words or hundreds of words. But what I love about his visuals and his ideas that he's able to communicate, if you look at them, it's like I'm able to tell a story from the visual itself. Like it leaves kind of the imagination, you know, to the and I take less than like 3 to 5 seconds to be able to figure this out. So in this one, it's like, I don't know, to expand it, I would have said something like, you know, if I like, don't try to do 10 things semi-well, like, you know, do one thing super well and then forget about like the other 9 things. And that's how you narrow your focus. But I'm able to, as the audience, like to expand upon that. And I think that's very, very powerful. And very, very few people actually can do this, although a lot of people are actually looking for the ability to tell a story this well and this compellingly well.
It's very minimalistic. I like the, you know, the really, you know, economy of the not overwhelming the
So again, it's like, how do you get meaning? Like, and I tested this myself. I tested it, like I showed people some random, you know, like pictures like that. Some even without, of course, some of them I require some text, but some I don't. Like in this one, work versus luck, I don't even require the text here. I could tell, like work, it gives you reap what you sow, right? So if you work, it's compounding, your results are compounding. If it's luck, it's like, you don't know, it's a hit or miss, like it's a one-off event and that's it. And it's so clear, like, you know, nobody needs to tell me that. My brain reads that within like 3 seconds and I can tell the complete story. And I think this is a very successful type of storytelling. I'm not saying that, you know, every single like business or brand would be able to emulate this. But the idea was that I found his approach very succinct and he follows the principle of like, how do you condense as much meaning as possible within a short amount of time. And he's definitely doing quite well at this.
Yeah, I love it. So it's great. You know, and as you said, you know, everybody's telling a different story. Try to find meaning in what it really means in your life. So.
Yeah, and he does so many things. I mean, like he does, you know, slide GIFs, and then he does quotes. I'm even amazed sometimes. I'm like, how do you come out with all of these ideas? But anyway, it's just good at this. One more example. So I think of like brands these days, like it's not just the brands, but I think especially in the tech startup environment, and I'm quite active on Twitter, like I find that the founders actually sometimes have more interesting things, you know, like that they talk about. So this guy, so it's a personal brand, perhaps. He's one of the product managers at Stripe, and he talks about high agency. And what I love about I've been reading and following his tweets because they're so, once again, like it's like reading 20 of his thread, which I would finish within like 5 to 10 minutes. It's sometimes like reading a condensed version of one book. And that's again, following the principle of like, you would condense the most amount of meaning within the shortest amount of time. And I think Shreyas does this really well. And in this, like you could see his method of trying to explain to us who is a person with high agency. So he goes through a bit of like text to explain that. But then, you know, he puts it in a very simple, like 2x2 matrix. And then he kind of explains, you know, again, like I read this and this one may take me a bit longer. Maybe I take 15 seconds to digest the diagram, but the second I do, I get it. And then he goes on to explain it and then he uses all of these visuals to kind of say like, well, if you hire a person with, let's say, low talent, but has high agency, which is basically the ability of getting things done, even when the odds are against you, it's okay, because these people, because of their high ability of getting things done and making things happen, they would become game changers. So they would become, their talent would grow over time. So it's fine to get that, versus getting somebody who's highly talented, but they just complain about everything. Then you have a frustrated genius, and these people would, basically be a problem in the organization. And all of these things become so clear. And it, like, again, my brain starts working when I read and together the visuals that accompany it. It helps me get the message even faster. And he uses, this is paper and pen, like there's nothing, no secret to this. I don't think he spends too much time, trying to figure out like what's the best way of, he's not a brand. At the end of the day, he's a person who's sharing, and again, his social media is doing super well. Lots of followers in the product management perspective, but the idea is the same. Like, he follows the whole principle of how do I get, the most amount of meaning. And like I said, sometimes I go back to read his tweets because I feel like it's like a book summary and I get so much out of it within such a short amount of time. And I love like following people like that, and and learning from them how they actually manage to master this art of storytelling. I don't even know if they think of themselves as storytellers, but I certainly see that like they have a lot of talent in trying to succinctly condense and compress lots of information, lots of useful information.
This is
within
actually
a short amount
of what you've shown here, especially these characters that he drew here. Obviously, he's not an illustrator, and I think this is another trend that I see kind of emerging. I even find myself started using a stylus on a Adobe Sketch, for example, to draw just simple things that can personalize a graphic using my own ideas. And I think this is another layer that started to trickle in, because we would think that only illustrators that can really know how to draw like a full body of a person, facial expression, are really focused on this area. But now we start seeing a lot of folks like this example that are not feel confident to really start drawing.
So and that's the thing. I think like people are beginning to, and brands, companies, as well as individuals, are beginning to like realize the whole value of like stories, because or storytelling, because you may have a message that's really compelling, but if you don't have either the visual part, and in some cases you don't even need very strong visuals. I think that's the point that I'm making, because the most important part is how do we get that message, that story, whatever, across in the best way that resonates together with the audience. So and like you said, you don't need to be a very artistic person. The most important part is that that's the best representation that you can think of in order to communicate that story. So that, like, I think that's precisely what storytelling is about, and more people are aware of it. Because before this, I think people were just thinking about how do I make this look good, how do I make this look pretty and all that. But now they're getting it that it's not about that. It's not so much about the beautiful part of things. It's really about that message that's compelling.
No, you're right. I would also call it maybe the rugged look, or the authentic, the not polished. That's what really shows your personality versus the top designer quality. So
like it'll be good to have the designer quality as well. Like I'm gonna admit that, but at the same time, what I've discovered is that I feel like the story trumps it. It trumps even. That's the message that I think as Piktochart. I know that we're a design tool, so I'm not gonna like shoot ourselves in the foot. But at the same time, it's totally true. Like the message matters a lot more, and people are realizing it. Our customers are, and that's also why we're also headed in a direction where we'll make sure that we're not positioning ourselves like just purely as a design tool.
Yeah, that's very smart. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so looking at your time at Piktochart, obviously it's a journey, like, and any journey has ups and downs. Can you talk a little bit about maybe a memorable failure, or things that didn't work out along the way that you've learned some important lesson?
Yeah, I have. So this one isn't about, visual storytelling itself. I have lots and lots of failures, but I think I'll share this one, which is more related to like product itself. So we actually launched an iPad app 4 years ago, and it was a massive flop. We actually, like 2 years after that, we had to unpublish it from the App Store. So the idea, like I'm going to talk about how we came about the idea and then what I learned. So the idea came about because mobile seemed to be all the rage, like when you think about 4 years ago. So we launched a survey among our like user base, and then we kind of asked them, well, which, like, do you all need a mobile device? Like, what will you need it for? And then like, which mobile device? Like, you're an Android, are you on tablets, or are you on like, the iPhone? And then the first, and like we got a very, I wouldn't say skew, but we got a very high response on the iPad. So we actually built it. And this was like 4 years ago. So if I ever had to do this all over again, I never would do it. The first one is to like really understand the user segmentation. Like that's super, super important. So we actually have a ton of like schools and, education like using us. And we didn't realize that the ones who gave us the response of iPad were actually skewed towards the education sector. So that made our results like very biased. Like it wasn't, so much to do with business. I know it's a very rookie mistake, but still like the importance of user segmentation was like super important since then. And the second one is actually like, do not build what the users want. I think Henry Ford was the famous one who came up with, if you ever ask what the users want, you'll build faster horses. You never get cars. So learn about what they need and why they need it. And like from there, try to solve for the problem instead of taking the solution out of their mouths. And then the third one was that we tried to build the entire app in-house. And that's not very smart because we're all not iOS developers. I think we would have and should have outsourced this to professionals instead. And then, because we just spent too much time trying to figure it out. And the fourth one is, and this is lean, and we now build like our products in a lean and an agile fashion as much as we can. So go for the most minimal way of validating a particular idea prototype. And these are like all of the mistakes that we've done to do with like product discovery and, market validation as well.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on very important tips for a lot of people, in different disciplines. The second one that came to my mind is really, the iPad, which is kind of in between the smartphone and the laptop. That nobody knew that it's a need. And kind of validates what you said. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that since we unfortunately 8 months into the pandemic, and that has changed the world in a really dramatic way, both on the personal level, but also on the business side. Most businesses that kind of try to delay digital transformation had to jump right in because nobody will show up in the office. And what kind of intrigued me in your background is that you've been working virtually for a while now, even before the pandemic. So I'm kind of curious to see, if you have any, insights about working virtually, and if you see any trends, specifically at this time in social distancing and the virtual workplace.
Yeah. I thought about this more from a product perspective, but I also think that there may be a more cultural answer. So I know that the workplace culture will evolve. Like it's forced already to go through a very massive evolution right now. Like lots of teams and companies are forced to work, remotely. And I think one of the biggest things that happen out of this is how do you foster as much empathy and ensure that people are still building relationship, they still have the camaraderie as they would if they were all like just sitting right side by side. And I think that's a challenge. And the second one is, if the company or the leadership isn't already a culture that's very trusting, that becomes quite a big problem. Like I've taken quite a number of questions from other entrepreneurs that have never done this before, and they kind of go like, well, how do you trust your team? Like, how do you know that they're not running errands? Like, is it okay if they run errands? I'm like, are you still living in the, like in the 1950s where you need to clock in and clock out? Like it doesn't matter, right? In this age and time, like productivity is not equal to time at all. It's not the amount of time that you spend in front of your computer that determines like the quality of your outcome. So I felt that for from a cultural perspective, like, companies really have to learn how to shift and adapt, like build relationships literally through, through the screen and through videos. And actually for the product, we saw something else that was like interesting. And you probably, I'm very sure that you know that, because I saw on your, in your podcast as well, you had guests that were all about like creating long form video content. And we can see that videos are exploding right now. Like the watch time on number of people watching on YouTube has actually grown by 60%. That's crazy. Like watch time, So like, it's not. I think if it's not because of pandemic, it shouldn't have grown this much. Like the amount of time people are spending on videos right now. So every company's like meetings are now recorded in videos. I mean, like this is a video on its own,
Right, exactly.
But what's great about videos is that it's so personable. It contains like really rich contextual cues about like what a person's like. My personality shows through the video, so does yours, like, and that is wonderful. And I think that brands should learn how to embrace this more and more. And I don't mean like the perfectly scripted ad or I mean like really natural conversations like that. People want to see what's going on, behind the brand, like talked about by like real people and things like that. So you also see like several companies embracing this more and more. They're trying their best. Obviously, it's still scripted, but like for example, I think Microsoft, like Satya Nadella, does a seriously good job with these videos. Whenever they're announcing like a new launch of a product, like I know that he's worked on the script, but he still looks so real natural and so authentic, very, very natural. Like he either has it or I don't know, it's just the way, like the way, his team has arranged for him to look. But but I love videos, and we have, we've just recently built a product as well to enable video repurposing really quickly. So it's not yet there in terms of like the storytelling capabilities, but we're sooner or later going to be building in that area as well, because we just see that videos is here to stay. Like they really are here to stay.
And kind of a related question to this, as you probably heard in the news, all this talk about the upcoming vaccines. So how do you see like the post-pandemic landscape looks like for businesses, mixed reality of both offline interaction and virtual?
I'm personally, I felt like it's almost like a good development, like it forces every company's culture. Like I said, if the employers or the leadership wasn't very trusting, they would be able to find ways of getting, work done. I think it has opened up like tons of possibility for people to live happier and work much happier, because they're like lots of people, as we all know, have moved out of like, the Bay Area, etc. Like back to either where they used to be. And I mean, like work is now no longer like tagged or packed to a location specifically. And I also think it's forcing like lots of cultural changes within organizations, which is again really, really good. So in all of this, I mean, anyway, it's going to take some time, even with the vaccines out. It's not like the whole world will get,
sure.
It's still going to take some time, but I just see this as a leap into the future of work actually, and it's taking place and it's looking very exciting and good. There's just a ton of flexibility and freedom, which is what I think work should be anyway. So
I mean, there's definitely, as you said, some value to in-person interactions, but I think now that people realize the value of virtual and the efficiency, the cost reduction, you can accomplish a lot. It's just a matter of finding the right balance when you're ready.
That's right.
So one thing you talked about earlier is really how can you communicate information in the shortest time, but in a way that's very impactful. And one of the things that a lot of marketers and entrepreneurs are thinking about is how can you really condense emotions into a visual story in the most effective way. So in the planning stage, people think about that, or this is an afterthought. What do you think?
I don't personally think about emotions as an afterthought, and neither do I really plan for emotions. I felt that every single person, like especially in videos and things like that, like a brand itself has a personality that it would convey, and that's also why I'm all for people living out the brands. Like in the case of like Microsoft earlier that I spoke about, like Satya, when he talks about all of this new launches, etc., he's representing Microsoft to a certain extent, and his emotions, his personality, everything comes through and it shines through. So I don't know if there's a way to condense like emotions, because I think it's more important to just be real and authentic. Like, if we were like, I don't know, the team that's working on that were to give him a script that would make him sound like, I don't know, Steve Jobs, it probably wouldn't work out because he's not him. And he has his own individual, personality. So I don't feel like emotions or personality needs to be further condensed. It's already, it's there. Like the moment you show up, it's you.
It's part of the package.
And that's great because people love that. In this age, especially where we're all, still currently socially distanced and all that, people crave for that. They crave for realness. They crave for raw things and authenticity. So I think people don't really need to do more than just literally being themselves for the aspect of emotions and personality. For the message itself, I always think you need to trim the fat. You always need to trim everything as much as possible, because most of the time, less is more. Less is really more.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's definitely emotion. It's on one hand, it's a built-in feature that will show the minute you show your face on a video. But to your point about the message, when you kind of look at the buyer's journey, maybe awareness messages, some of them, use some drama to create sense of, tension, versus others that may be designed to create admiration. So you can, at least on the message level, things that are not really related to the delivery, maybe think about what emotions you want to trigger. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
One thing that is also interesting to me to hear your opinion about, since you've been active in the visual storytelling space for a while now, where do you see the future and where are we headed with visual storytelling?
Yeah, I think, so my team and I have been talking about this quite a lot. And I think that visual storytelling is headed in the same direction that design has for the past 10 years. So I'm going to contrast it a bit. 10 years ago, in order to be if you wanted to design anything at all, you would need either a degree or you need to learn up Adobe. Both these things do not, take a short amount of time. You need to basically invest quite a bit in order to become a designer. And it was a siloed profession. If you're a designer, you're a designer. You're not a marketer who can design, or you're not a salesperson who can design. You're just a designer in this case. And I think that visual storytelling, although it's partially democratized already, that like yourself, you're creating an institute to teach people all about like visual storytelling. There are others and their tools even right now that are empowering people more and more. So right now it feels like like people look at storytelling still as a siloed profession, but I think more and more it's going to be like you're a marketer and you're a storyteller at the same time. You're a engineer and you're a storyteller at the same time. So it will be, the more it's democratized, we'll get there to the point where you're not like, of course, there's still always going to be design experts, as there will be, storytelling experts, and we will never run away from that. But I think that the gap is going to be a lot lesser in the next like 5 to 10 years. It's speeding up already because I can just see the amount of attention that storytelling gets, especially in 2020. Actually, my one of my managers who was attending a couple of conferences, like I think she was in AdWorld, etc., like just looking and keeping her ears and eyes out for what's going on, and she was like, "You will not believe how many times I've heard the word storytelling in those talks, like it's just too much. It's as if like whichever sector you're in, people talk about storytelling." And she's like, "You're a designer, they talk about it. You're a marketer, they talk about it. You're in sales, they talk about it. Like you're in startups and tech, they talk about it." So it's like, it's nonstop. So I think
do you think it's a fad? Like, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we're talking about content marketing.
Yeah.
and now it's storytelling. Do you think it's a fad or
No,
is it going to stay?
I don't think so. So similarly, like, I mean, people talk about it because it's like, it's such a buzzword, like similar with infographics, everything else, but they're never ever gonna go away. I mean, like the form of it may change. People may like use a different term because they're also sick of, using the word storytelling or whatever. But I felt like the idea is that the core principle is there. You need to make your message understandable. You have got to, communicate this and ensure that people are actually impacted through the message. So that would never change, that inherent intent for every person who is communicating to want to ensure that the message arrives really well and is well received by the audience would never change. And I that's why I think it may take different shapes and sizes or forms or words or trends, and different sectors may be adopting it, but I don't see it going away.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be really fascinating ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So just in conclusion, you shared so many valuable tips here today. So maybe you can summarize us, the topic of the day. What is your top 3 tips for creating impactful visual stories?
Yeah, sure. So I think about, like, first back to the, like, what were the key drivers for compelling visual stories. So the first, I would always think about like the story or the message, whichever, and to think, why is this even compelling? Why is this novel? Do people understand it? And then think about how I would structure it. And then for the actual design itself, I would try my best to like cut the fluff and keep it as succinct as possible, as clean as possible, so that whoever's looking at it would get it in the quickest amount of time. And the other thing for me is like really testing out your message. I find this really important because sometimes where like it's very difficult to work on whether it's a keynote or even a report that's really important or a presentation that's really important on your own. And we all need feedback. And the earlier we can get that, like, I try to draft out my messages in like just a couple of sentences or paragraphs, and I throw that to a couple of people and just be like, what do you feel? What do you think I'm trying to say here? Try to get them to recap. Like, how do you feel when like when you read this? And once I get that story arc done almost right, then I move on to the rest of it, like actually fleshing it out, creating visuals. But I think that initial validation's better done earlier rather than you've created the entire thing, designed the entire thing, and then you give it to feedback. To me, that's a bit late. You will waste a lot of time and effort.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but these are a few tips that I usually practice on my own.
Yeah, and I think these are all very smart ones. I really like the last one because, a lot of times things that you've created, it has a meaning only to you, but nobody else sees the same thing that you see. It's important to validate it earlier. Cool. That's great. Thank you so much, Ai Ching, for such a great opportunity to learn more about your journey and how you see the world of visual storytelling. And so for our folks that are actually watching this video or actually tuning in on the podcast networks, if they have any questions, how can they reach out to you?
Look up for me either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm Ai Ching Goh, Goh, and on LinkedIn, it's my full name. So you just have to spell it out, but you'll find me.
Awesome. All right. Again, thank you so much, Ai Ching. It's been a fantastic experience for me to have a chance to really chat with you. I really enjoyed your summit. So this is a great opportunity to dig deeper and kind of, in a way, continue the summit one-on-one. And
no, thank you so much for thinking of doing this. This is fun.
Yeah. So thank you again. And for all of you watching or tuning in, let's keep in touch in the upcoming episode of Visual Storytelling today. Thank you.